So I've hand sewn the small squares together. They recommend that you do hand sew it. Traditionally a quilt is hand sewn. I'm going to zip them with my sewing machine. I think my hand sewing lacks a bit of integrity and needs a bit of machine power. Let's get sewing. So I'm going to follow the seam allowance line which I've drawn on each of the squares. I've laid out the formation of the patch flat out in front of me so that I know that when I'm sewing the correct pieces together. So I've stitched all the pairs of small squares together. The next step is very important and it affects the way that the seams line up. I'm going to get the hot iron and press the seams to the side so that they're out the way and that the seams line up. So I'm just neatening up my pairs of squares, trimming off all the excess cotton and all the frayed bits before I press it. I'm now going to iron the squares and the seams. Now that the seams are pressed flat, I'm going to sew the large square to the pair of smaller squares. So I'm pinning the two halves together. I'm pinning it to make sure that the seams both align. So we've stitched the whole piece together. Our next step is to turn the square print side down and to iron the seams flat. And here we have it, a double four patch. The seams are fairly lined up. There's a bit of a discrepancy in some of them. It is the very first time I've ever made a traditional patchwork block for a quilt, so I'm pretty happy with how it turned out. And considering I'm not one for instructions, I'm going to stick with the traditional patchwork blocks as far as the instructions go. I might go a bit deviating with the character squares, but definitely I'm going to follow the instructions for the patchwork. So now we've completed the requirements for issue number 1 and issue number 2. How did I go? I think I'm going to deviate with the characters. They are characters and I think they do need to have a bit of a twist to them. The traditional patchwork blocks, I'm going to stick with the instructions. I don't know how to do patchwork, so this is a good way for me to learn all the techniques involved. Until then, thanks for joining me in the craft room. See you next time.